My name is Iris Archer, and I am 33 years old. 2 weeks ago, my mother rang my doorbell for the very first time in 9 years. She stood on my porch in a beige cardigan with a carry-on suitcase and a folded piece of paper. That piece of paper was not an apology. It was a handwritten list in blue ink, and every single line had a $sign next to it, totaling exactly $925,000. She did not say she was sorry, and she did not ask about the grandchildren she had never met. She simply said that we needed to talk about the family's future. But here is what my mother did not know as she stood on my porch. I had been keeping a list of my own for 9 long years. Every returned birthday card, every ignored voicemail, and every cruel text message my sister sent about me behind my back was perfectly chronicled. I had 29 items, all labeled, all dated, and all filed in a navy blue binder that I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. She brought a list of what she wanted, but I brought a list of exactly what she did. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, the place where ordinary people face impossible family moments and walk out with their dignity entirely intact. If you are new here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And while you are at it, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I absolutely love reading those. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly how I handled the ultimate toxic family betrayal, step by step, so that you can learn how to protect your own peace, build your own chosen family, and use the undeniable power of receipts to set boundaries that nobody can cross. Let me take you back to the summer I turned 24, which was the summer my family officially told me I was no longer one of them. I grew up in Millfield, Ohio, a town with a population of just over 2,000, one Baptist church, and a diner where every booth smelled like coffee and bacon grease. My father, Kenneth, worked at the lumber yard on Route 7 for 31 years, giving the same quiet nod when he came through the door at 5:42 every evening. My mother, Diane, ran the household and the church women's committee with equal, terrifying precision. She organized the Easter brunch, coordinated the prayer chain, and decided who brought what to every potluck. Then there was my younger sister, Paige. Paige was 4 years younger and everything I was not. She was loud, confident, and the kind of girl who got voted homecoming queen and acted surprised. Mom absolutely adored her, and Dad called her Sunshine. I was the quiet one, the daughter who did the dishes without being asked, scored perfect on every math test, and never got a party for either of those things. I do not say this with bitterness, but rather because you need to understand the fundamental math in our family. In my house, love was a budget, and Paige was the line item that always got funded first. When I was 18, I got a full-ride scholarship to Ohio State, making me the first Archer to ever go to college. As I left, my mother packed my suitcase and slipped a card inside with flowers on the front. In her handwriting on the back, it read, "Come home soon. You belong here." I kept that card for 15 years in my desk drawer because it was the last kind thing she ever wrote to me. The shift happened when I met Marcus Ellison during the spring semester of my junior year. Marcus sat 2 rows ahead of me in advanced statistics, solving regression problems like he was reading a grocery list. He was an engineering major with a computer science minor, and he was there on a partial scholarship from Cleveland. Marcus is biracial. He has his mother's eyes, his father's jawline, and a profound way of listening that makes you feel like everything you say actually matters. His mother, Cora, was a retired school librarian who raised him alone, working 2 jobs until he turned 16. Marcus and I dated for 3 quiet, steady, unremarkable years before he proposed. Over those 3 years, he met my parents exactly twice. The first time, my mother smiled far too wide and called him Michael instead of Marcus. The second time, she managed to use his real name, but she refused to look at him when she said it. Both times, my father shook his hand and said almost nothing. I tried to tell myself it was just small-town nerves, but my sister Paige was the honest one. At Thanksgiving, she leaned over to me and whispered that while he was nice, Mom was never going to be okay with it. When Marcus proposed at our kitchen table in our tiny apartment near campus, I said yes before he could even finish the sentence. I called home that night to share the news. My mother picked up the phone, and when I told her, the line went completely quiet for 7 full seconds. She didn't say congratulations, and she didn't ask about the ring. Instead, she delivered a warning, telling me I needed to think about what this meant for the family. My father got on the extension, cleared his throat twice, and said absolutely nothing. 2 days later, Paige texted me to say Mom had been crying since I called, asking if I was happy now. The ultimate betrayal arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a handwritten letter. It wasn't an email or a text, but a physical letter written in Diane Archer's cursive on cream-colored stationery. She wrote 4 paragraphs, and the final one drew a line in the sand that would define the next decade of my life. She wrote that if I went through with the wedding, I was choosing him over my family. She stated they could not support it, they would not attend, and if I walked down that aisle, I should not expect to walk back through their door. She explicitly wrote, "He is not one of us, Iris. He never will be." This is the first major lesson I want to deliver to you today. When toxic family members issue an ultimatum, they are relying on your fear of abandonment to force your compliance. They expect you to shrink, to apologize, and to beg for your seat back at their table. But I didn't beg. I read the letter 3 times, folded it carefully, and put it in a manila folder. I didn't know exactly why I kept it at the time, but the analytical part of my brain, the part that files receipts and labels bank statements, told me to hold on to it. Marcus and I got married at the Multnomah County Courthouse on a Saturday in June, with exactly 12 guests, all of them from Marcus's side. His mother, Cora, flew in from Cleveland, carrying a garment bag and a Tupperware of homemade pound cake. She pinned a silk flower to my $160 consignment shop dress, held both of my hands, and told me, "Welcome to the family, baby." No father walked me down the aisle because there was no aisle, just a hallway with fluorescent lights and a judge who mispronounced our names. But that night, sitting on the edge of the bed staring at my $6 grocery store bouquet, my hands shook with grief because the 2 people who raised me simply did not care enough to watch. 1 week later, I decided to test the boundary. I mailed a card to Millfield containing our wedding photo on the courthouse steps, writing that we were happy and hoping they could be happy for us someday. Exactly 11 days later, the card came back to me stamped in red, "Return to sender." I stared at that red stamp for a very long time. Then I opened my manila folder, placed the card inside, and took out a red pen. I wrote, "Item 2, wedding photo returned." That was the birth of the binder, and this brings me to the core value of how to handle a family that tries to erase you. You must start keeping records. Year 1 of my estrangement was incredibly difficult. I called my mother 4 times, and every single time it went straight to voicemail. I left short, careful messages, just saying hi and mentioning I was studying for my CPA exam. She never called back. I sent a card for her birthday, a card for my father's birthday, and a card for Christmas. All 3 came back with the exact same red, "Return to sender" stamp. My father sent exactly 1 text in February that read, "Your mother needs time." Paige posted a family photo on Facebook captioned, "Sunday dinner with my people," and I wasn't in it because I hadn't been invited. I printed that screenshot, not to torture myself, but because I was a financial analyst, and financial analysts absolutely never throw away documentation. Every returned card, every voicemail transcript, and every piece of evidence that my family had decided I no longer existed went into that folder. By March, the folder was so thick that I had to upgrade to a proper navy blue 3-ring binder, complete with dividers for each year and red pen labels on every single tab. I wasn't building a case for revenge. I was keeping receipts because numbers and documents do not lie, and someday, if my future children asked why they didn't have grandparents on my side, I wanted to hand them undeniable facts, not a manipulated version of history. While my biological family was busy erasing me, my chosen family was busy building a future. In year 2, Marcus quit his software job to focus on a prototype he had been building in our garage. It was a compliance platform for small businesses, designed to make SEC filings less painful. He set up 2 monitors and a $12 Goodwill whiteboard by a space heater. I would come home from my analyst job, heat up leftover soup, and sit next to him until midnight reviewing financial models. We poured our lives into that software. When our twins, Liam and Sophie, arrived in November of year 3, Marcus's mother, Cora, flew in the very next morning and stayed for 2 weeks. She cooked, she cleaned, she rocked Liam at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she brought yellow and white crocheted blankets. That is what a real grandmother looks like. Meanwhile, I had sent my mother ultrasound photos and birth announcements for both twins. They were all returned. Those became items 13, 14, and 15 in the binder. A mutual friend then sent me a screenshot of a text Paige had written. Her children don't have real grandparents. That is what she chose. I printed that text and filed it as item 16. I want you to remember this. Toxic people will constantly rewrite the narrative to make themselves the victim of the boundaries they forced you to set. Keep the proof. By year 7, the narrative began to shift because the math began to shift. Marcus's company, Compliance Corps, landed a Series B funding round of $12 million, bringing our post-money valuation to $68 million. We held 22% of the company. I left my analyst job to become the full-time CFO, meaning my name was on every SEC filing that left the building. We bought a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in Lake Oswego. TechCrunch ran a small piece on the funding, which most people scrolled past, but someone in Millfield, Ohio did not. A high school friend texted me to say that my mother had asked about Marcus's company at church, specifically wanting to know what Series B meant. For 7 years, my mother had not spoken my name, but now that there were millions of dollars involved, Diane Archer was suddenly paying attention. That same year, I sent what I knew would be my final birthday card. Inside, I tucked a photo of Liam and Sophie at their school's fall festival. On the back, I wrote, "They ask about you sometimes. I tell them you live far away." It came back to me in 9 days, but the envelope was different. The flap was creased, and the glue had been cut and resealed with a strip of clear tape. Someone in that house, likely my father, had opened it and looked at his grandchildren. But someone else, my mother, had made him put the photo back, tape it shut, and return it. I labeled it item 23. Birthday card opened and resealed, photo viewed, still returned. The true tipping point came in year 9, when Compliance Corps went public on the NASDAQ. Marcus and I stood on the exchange floor in New York and watched our company's market cap hit $440 million. Our net worth on paper was $44 million. I didn't even know what to do with that number. It felt like a spreadsheet error. But the news coverage was everywhere. That night, checking my phone in our hotel room, I saw 5 missed calls from Millfield, Ohio. 3 from an unknown number, 1 from my father, and 1 from my mother. The next morning, my father left a voicemail. His voice was older, and he called me baby girl for the first time since I was 14. He said he saw me on the news and that he was proud of me. He told me my mother wanted to talk. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. He had ignored my wedding, ignored the birth of my twins, and ignored 7 years of returned mail. But the morning after an IPO, he was suddenly proud of me. 2 days later, my mother texted me. It was a 63-word draft that she had clearly edited and rehearsed. She wrote that life was short, that she thought about me every day, and that she wanted to discuss the family's future. There was absolutely zero apology. She referred to our estrangement as the differences that divide us, as if she hadn't explicitly written that my husband wasn't one of them. I screenshotted the text, printed it, and filed it as item 29 in the binder. Shortly after, Paige mysteriously reached out for the first time in 9 years, claiming she was in Portland for work and wanted to grab coffee. I met her in a public cafe, where she showed up in a blazer, hugged me for too long, and proceeded to ask me exactly 32 questions. She wanted to know the size of my house, the schools my kids attended, and if Marcus was still the CEO during our coffee. I caught her reflection in the window. She was secretly taking photographs of my white Tesla in the parking lot. She was building a financial reconnaissance report for my mother. A friend from Ohio eventually leaked screenshots of a family group chat to me. The messages were devastatingly clear. Paige had texted the group. His company was valued at $68 million. If they IPO, we are looking at $300 million minimum. My mother replied, I need to go in person with a plan. Paige instructed her, make a list, be specific about what we need. She is a numbers person. She will respond to numbers. Start with the mortgage, then medical, then retirement. Layer it. Make it look like family investment. My father expressed hesitation, but my mother shut him down, typing, she has more money than this entire town. She can afford to help her family. If you are listening to this and you have ever had someone cut you off, only to come running back the exact moment your numbers changed, I want you to drop a comment right now. So many of us carry this burden and we need to talk about it. I knew Diane was coming, and I knew she was bringing demands. When the taxi pulled up to my Portland home on a Tuesday morning, I was ready. She stepped out in her beige cardigan and pearl studs, carrying a small suitcase. I didn't lead her to the living room. I led her straight to the kitchen table. The kitchen is where the truth lives. She sat down, looked at the photo of Cora on my fridge, and unfolded her handwritten piece of paper. It had 5 bullet points in blue ink. She read them aloud to me. A retirement fund for $500,000, a college fund for Paige's son for $200,000, medical expenses for my father's knee at $45,000, a mortgage payoff for $180,000, and a request for $3,000 in monthly support. The total was $925,000. After reading it like an invoice, she looked at me and said, this is what families do, Iris. Your father worked his whole life. He sacrificed for you. It is time to give back. She had not mentioned my name with a single apology. She was sitting in a house she had never visited, asking for money from grandchildren she had completely ignored. I stood up, walked to my office, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out the heavy, 3-inch thick, navy blue binder. I carried it to the kitchen and set it on the table right next to her $925,000 list of demands. She looked at the binder, confused, and asked what it was. I placed my hands flat on the table and told her, you brought a list, Mom. I brought one too. I opened the binder to tab 1, year 1. I didn't yell, and I didn't perform. I spoke to her the exact same way I deliver quarterly reports to my corporate board, factual, organized, and item by item. I pulled out the first white envelope with the red return to sender stamp and placed it on the table. I read the label. Item 1, birthday card mailed September 12, 2017, returned September 23rd. I pulled out the second envelope. Item 2, wedding photo mailed June 14, 2017, returned June 25th. I laid them out one by one, creating a row of sealed doors that I had tried to open and that she had slammed shut. I moved to year 2, reading the transcript of the 47-second voicemail she never returned. I showed her the text from my father stating she needed more time, and I asked her, it has been 9 years, Mom. How much more time did you need? My mother finally broke into tears, but they were the controlled, theatrical tears she used when she wanted sympathy without surrendering any of her dignity. She tried to claim she was just hurt, that people say things when they are upset. So, I flipped to year 4 and pulled out the printed text message from Paige. I read it aloud. Her children don't have real grandparents. That is what she chose. Then I flipped to the final tab and pulled out the 7 pages of screenshots from their recent group chat. I read Paige's instructions to make it look like a family investment, and my mother's text declaring I had more money than the entire town. The theatrical tears instantly dried up, replaced by an anger I recognized from my childhood. She hissed that I had no right to read their private messages. I looked her dead in the eye and replied, you had no right to return my children's photos. Then I reached for the most important receipt of all. Item 23. I pulled out the year 7 birthday card, the one with the cut glue and the clear tape. I told her I knew it had been opened. I knew my father had looked at the faces of Liam and Sophie, and I knew she had forced him to tape it back up and send it away. Her hands went flat on the table, and genuine fear crossed her face. She whispered that she had been afraid that if she let any of it in, she would have had to admit she was wrong, and she was too proud to do that. But that moment of honesty evaporated instantly, and she stiffened up, blaming me again by saying I had made my choice. I looked at the two documents sitting side by side on my kitchen table, her list of demands for $925,000, and my binder of 29 items proving 9 years of weaponized silence. I told her she didn't erase me. I told her she had tracked my husband's company for months and showed up to my door with an itemized invoice. I closed the metal rings of the binder with a loud click. "You did not come here because you missed me, Mom," I said. "You came here because the numbers changed." She stood up, her chair scraping against the tile, and tried to leverage the ultimate toxic parent guilt trip. She talked about everything they did for me growing up: the food, the clothes, the school supplies. I told her that raising me was not a debt, it was what parents are supposed to do. I reminded her that she gave me a card telling me to come home, and then explicitly told me never to come back. I told her that while she claimed my husband was not one of us, his mother had been the only real grandmother my children ever had for 9 straight years. Right at that moment, the garage door rumbled, and Marcus walked into the kitchen. He didn't say a word. He set his laptop bag down, walked over to me, put his hand firmly on my shoulder, and sat down right next to me. He wore a simple flannel shirt and running shoes, completely unbothered, showing no signs of our newly minted $44 million net worth. He was just a good man, a dedicated father, and a fiercely loyal husband standing by his wife. My mother stared at his hand on my shoulder, realizing that I didn't need the Archer family because I had already built a real one of my own. I delivered my final boundary with the same factual tone I use on a balance sheet. I told her I would not give her a single dime, not because I couldn't afford it, but because the moment I handed her a check, she would rewrite history. She would tell herself, and everyone else, that the silence was just a misunderstanding, a rough patch, and that the payout justified her behavior. I told her those 9 years were a choice, and that if she ever wanted to know her grandchildren, it wouldn't start with a financial plan. It would start with a real apology. She picked up her suitcase, walked out my front door, and it clicked shut behind her. It was the sound of someone leaving who finally understood she had lost something she could never afford to buy back. 2 weeks later, my father called me while I was at work. His voice cracked. He told me he should have opened the door for me 9 years ago, and that he was deeply sorry. He explicitly stated he did not want my money. He only wanted to know his grandchildren, and he asked if I would let him try. I told him we would start very slow, phone calls every 2 weeks, no visits yet, and absolutely no money. Just talking. He agreed. My mother, however, never called or wrote again. The silence returned. But this time, the silence was entirely hers. My binder still sits in the bottom drawer of my desk, holding 29 items from 9 years. I never had to add a 30th item. Here is what 9 years of silence and a navy blue binder taught me. Family is not simply the people who share your last name. Family is not the people who suddenly show up when your net worth changes and your company goes public. Family is the people who show up when your world is small, when your garage is cold, and when your babies desperately need a grandmother. Family is the people who fly in from Cleveland every 6 weeks to crochet blankets and teach your son how to make grilled cheese. It was never about the money. It was always about showing up. That is my story. 9 years, 29 items, and 1 navy blue binder. If my story reminded you that your self-worth was never about a dollar amount, please share this video with someone who needs to hear that message today. You do not have to shrink yourself to fit at a table where you are only valued for what you can provide. Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.